Russians had dirt on Hillary Clinton. They had her.
Hey everybody, at about 1:15, I think really 1:20, this White House press conference is going to start. When it does, I'm going to flip it around and turn it back to the computer, which is set up. I'm going to set up the live stream page right now for you. Hold on a second.
Trying to get in with the Trump campaign.
You know, he was arrested, Papadopoulos, on July 27th, this past summer, and he's been cooperating. The affidavit says, following his arrest, defendant Papadopoulos met with the government on numerous occasions to provide information and answer questions. The more he cooperates, presumably less of a sentence he might get. Normally in a situation like this, very often, correct me if I'm wrong, the FBI, the government will put a wire on someone to see if they can get more information about others who may be implicated. Do we have any information at all on that?
No. In fact, there's nothing in these affidavits to suggest, and I don't think the FBI would ever place something like that at this point in the affidavit. Look, it could be that they did that. That would all be dependent on whether or not he could even get meetings set up with people at the White House. We have no indication that he was currently active at the White House or talking to people at the White House. Everything in this affidavit has to deal with when he was working for the campaign. And you know, in the affidavit, there are several instances of him communicating with senior level people on the campaign about his contact with the Russians. That is a significant piece of information. And it goes to what the former DNI head, you know, James Clapper, who's been on our air, and John Brennan, the former CIA director, who have been saying for months there are all these communications that concern them. Well, this here shows what exactly, at least some of what they were concerned with.
Yeah, Frank, I mean, not to blow our horn, but CNN, we've been colleagues at this table, reported some months ago that U.S. intelligence was aware of repeated communications between Trump campaign associates and Russians known to U.S. intelligence. And you remember the pushback at the time, including from Republican lawmakers, about that particular story. In fact, we're seeing evidence of it here laid out there. And keep in mind, much of the information contained, particularly in this statement of offense, contradicts the narrative we've been hearing from the White House as soon as moments ago, as recent as moments ago. Jim Acosta saying, for instance, that Papadopoulos did not really have contact with senior people in the campaign. He was low level. They didn't know what he was doing. In fact, there were emails to prove the opposite, that he was keeping them very informed and that they were giving him permission to go forward with these communications.
Right, and I think it depends what point of the campaign you might be talking about, because the campaign changed hands. You know, Steve Bannon came on board, I think it was in August, but then you had Paul Manafort there before that. So I think you might be talking about two different campaigns. If you read this statement very carefully, by my count, and I could be wrong at this point, there were 5 different people who are mentioned who had communications with Papadopoulos. And 2 of them are named as high-ranking campaign officials. One is a senior policy advisor. One is a campaign supervisor, and then there's another campaign official. And so, I mean, I think this is very carefully drawn out here to distinguish who these people are. And then, of course, in the footnote we are all looking at now, in this, one campaign official apparently emailed and said to Papadopoulos, had an email, but it wasn't to Papadopoulos. He was not included on this email chain. But the email said of the Russian meetings, let's discuss. We need someone to communicate that DT is not doing these trips. It should be someone low level in the campaign so as not to send any signal.
And then on the heels of that, there were other emails listed in these documents where the campaign supervisor, presumably the same person, encouraged him, George Papadopoulos, to go to Russia along with someone else, and then said also great work when Papadopoulos relayed that this historic meeting that could take place between Russian leadership and the Trump campaign. So basically what it does is it shows that even if George Papadopoulos was a bit player, he was low level, high-level campaign officials knew about this and they were encouraging it.
But here's the thing, in the end, Wolf, we still don't understand why it was important to meet with the Russians, why there were campaign officials pushing this meeting, why Papadopoulos was pushing this meeting. This is still unclear. You know, there's all sorts of theories out there, obviously, But the FBI in this affidavit has not laid that out.
Well, but to be clear, they have said, and this is on
No,
the front
he didn't
page
read
of the
that.
statement of offense, that this
Wait,
is
hold a
part
second, folks.
of an investigation involving, quote, and I'm quoting here, whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts. So
That guy on CNN didn't read
the narrative or the pushback.
the document. It says it right there that the Russian government was clearly looking forward to improve U.S.-Russian relations. They wanted to meet Donald Trump, and they had these emails about Hillary Clinton, so it was quite clear. You have to read the whole thing word for word, as I did in my previous live stream on this. Just saying.
So it makes you wonder.
But, Gloria, one thing that these contacts that George Papadopoulos had with these Russians, that meeting that they had at Trump Tower last summer involving some Russians and some senior Trump officials, including Manafort, who was there at Trump Tower, Jared Kushner, who was there, Donald Trump Jr., who was there, was the notion that this was about dirt on Hillary Clinton, and Papadopoulos was meeting ostensibly to get, quote, dirt on Hillary Clinton.
Look, they were trying to infiltrate. They were trying to sort of push every button and see where they could get in. And they did get a meeting with Donald Trump Jr. and Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort. And through Papadopoulos or others we've known, perhaps Carter Page, I mean, who knows, that they were trying to make some inroads here. And the question, and you've raised this, Shimon, time and time again, is why?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, on one hand, they were really passionate. The Russian side, they wanted the Magnitsky Act repealed. Now, why they think that they could make headway with just a candidate? Maybe they were, it's still unclear.
Making these inroads, I mean, to other candidates. I mean, and I think that's the question.
They saw an opening. It looks like they saw an opening there, and it would be. It looks like the offering of a quid pro quo, doesn't it? To have in the same meeting to discuss dirt on Hillary Clinton, for instance, in the Trump Tower meeting.
Because in the affidavit, they mentioned dirt on Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, right.
Which was motivating Papadopoulos.
But then in the same meeting to say, we're very interested in relaxing these sanctions.
Which probably also tells us why Mueller and the special counsel and the FBI is so interested in that Donald Trump Jr. meeting. Again, they see another example of dirt, Clinton dirt. Supposedly we're gonna help you. We may have Clinton dirt for you. So that was perhaps this gives us an indication of why they're so interested in that meeting as well. Now, that meeting came as a surprise to them. So, we'll see what happens here. But there's a lot in this affidavit.
And we should also say that some of this was referred to in the dossier.
Yes.
And this sort of effort to influence was referred to in the dossier. And so I think that may be one of the reasons that the intelligence community was taking this very seriously.
And let's not forget, these are the first charges we're learning about: Papadopoulos, Rick Gates, Manafort. This could be just the beginning. In the case of Papadopoulos, you start on the lower level, you try to flip them, and you work your way up to the bigger fish. So it is really, it's worth noting that there is a plea agreement that he is cooperating. In the case of Rick Gates and Manafort, yes, the White House can say these charges have nothing to do with the campaign, but let's not forget this investigation is ongoing, and there could be additional charges added. Again, this is just the first step.
We start with what you have the goods on, and they have the goods on these.
Well, and the interesting thing is that he's cooperating.
Right,
and we can't forget that.
I'm sure which makes other Trump campaign officials pretty nervous.
The FBI now has eyes into what was going on this national security team, this campaign national security team. They now have eyes. They have a person who was in these meetings, who knows what was going on, who knows about emails, has probably provided them with emails. So they have a pretty good window now into who was pushing some of this, what the conversations were about. That is a pretty significant development.
And just the way others are viewing this Papadopoulos offense statement, I spoke with a source on the Senate Intelligence Committee who used this language, quote, "It goes right to the heart of the collusion question." So, and of course the Senate Intel Committee has seen many of these emails as well and is investigating that very question.
The president tweeted a little while ago, sorry, but this is years ago, before Paul Manafort was part of the Trump campaign. But why aren't Crooked Hillary and the Dems the focus? And then he added, also, there is no collusion. But this notion of the George Papadopoulos involvement does suggest, as you point out, possible collusion.
Well, yeah, I mean, the statement of offense says that at the time of the interview, when the FBI did this interview with Papadopoulos, that the FBI was pursuing an investigation to that very question. Collusion, cooperation, coordinate. They use the word coordination.
And he was going to be charged, you know, obstruction. Papadopoulos is confronted with his own potential obstruction. I mean, after they interviewed him in one of the affidavits we read this morning, he went and changed his Facebook page and kind of tried to erase his Facebook page, which had communications with people he had said that he was not communicating with, as if the FBI would have been fooled by that.
They had a court order allowing them to go through all of his emails and all of that. Everyone stand by for a moment. One of the president's attorneys, Jay Sekulow, is joining us right now. Jay, thanks very much for joining us.
Sure, Wolf. Sure.
Have you spoken to President Trump today about the indictments and the guilty plea?
Well, I spoke to the president, but I'm obviously not going to discuss what my discussions with the presidents were. What I will tell you is that in reviewing the indictment first as it relates to the situation for Paul Manafort and Richard Gates, that when you read the indictment, and you've been covering this this morning and this afternoon, this is not involving the campaign or campaign activity. So in looking at this, looks like it was activity, again, these are allegations going back to as far back as 2006, so almost a decade ago, or a little over a decade ago. So as it relates to the campaign or campaign activity, there's nothing in the Manafort indictment.
I just want to point out, if you read the indictment involving Paul Manafort and Rick Gates, it does say they were looking into activity that they had during the campaign when he was the campaign chairman and Rick Gates worked for him. He was a deputy to the campaign chairman, so they're looking at that as well.
Well, they're looking, but the allegations in the indictment, though, are focused on their business activities, not campaign activities, not campaign events. So again, yes, there was an overlap in as far as the time frame goes. They were obviously still doing their business that they had at that time and their representations. But if you look at the actual charges that have been leveled, I mean, this is an indictment now. The charges that have been leveled will focus in on FARA registrations, tax evasion, money laundering. I mean, these are serious charges. I mean, no question. But they're not charges that involve the campaign. Yeah.
But one of the charges potentially could involve the campaign, and that's perjury, lying while he was involved in the campaign.
Well, a perjury, the 1001 charges is called, the 18 U.S.C. 1001, which is what George Papadopoulos ended up pleading guilty to. Again, doesn't mean it was a campaign activity. It means you were asked something and you gave the agent a false statement. That's what it is. It's a false statement charge. So based on the indictment and the information that's contained in the indictment, it doesn't mean that it was campaign activity or campaign involvement. It was just that there was an incorrect statement. It doesn't mean there was any illegality. It's often the case, and you know this, that it's not the underlying activity, it's the misstatement to the agent or the officer here.
Let's talk about George Papadopoulos, who's now pled guilty. He was arrested over the summer. How worried are you that his involvement in the campaign, working with national security advisors to the then candidate Donald Trump, and also establishing these contacts with Russians who had information, supposedly dirt on Hillary Clinton, that could set the stage for what the special counsel Robert Mueller is looking into, possible collusion?
I'm not concerned about it because if you look at what, again, George Papadopoulos' plea is, what the actual plea they entered into was, again, a false statement about a timing as to when he talked to somebody about Russian activities. It wasn't, by the way, these weren't activities that were illegal. It wasn't the conversation that they had. There's nothing in there that says that conversation was illegal or inappropriate or whatever it might have been. You look at what he said to the agent, and evidently, and again, obviously I don't represent Mr. Papadopoulos, but it's statements that he made to the agents that they're saying these
let me just be precise, Jay, as far as you know, the contacts he had while he was a national security advisor to the candidate Donald Trump, the contacts he had with these Russians were authorized by the campaign.
Now, let me say this. First of all, George Papadopoulos served on a committee. A lot of, as you know, campaigns have committees with various people on it. He was not a senior advisor to the Trump campaign. He was on a committee.
But his contacts were authorized by senior advisors according to the affidavit.
Yeah, according to the affidavit. So here's what that is, in and of itself, a conversation that someone would have regarding a foreign government, whether it was Great Britain, Russia, or anybody else. Those are not illegal activities. I mean, that's not an inappropriate activity. I mean, it's again, where did he get in trouble? Was it the call that he made to the professor? No, that was the Russian professor. No, that wasn't what got him in trouble. That's not where the crime was. The crime was lying about the timing of it to the agent. So again, you know, Wolf, I don't represent him, and so I don't want to give any kind of statement as to his culpability or knowledge.
I'm trying to listen to
from
this.
From our perspective, from
as
a private lawyer.
Oh,
Yeah,
but you asked me a
As far
dumbass
as you
question.
know, if a campaign advisor to the candidate,
Well, you
campaign
didn't do
advisor
that.
is trying to get, quote, dirt on Hillary Clinton from
Listen,
Russians,
you asked me
is there
something.
anything wrong with that?
Look at my feet. You've been here all morning.
Well, look, it's not illegal to get opposition research. My goodness,
I'm talking
but
about
you
from
spent-
Russians, from foreign adversaries of the United States.
No, well, I don't know if it was from Russians or Russian adversaries or somebody that was affiliated with Russia, but you spent the entire last week, which in the news was the whole Fusion GPS matter and the dossier and the DNC involvement there. Is that illegal activity? I mean, there's now committees looking at it, but here's what I know. I'm going to only talk about what I know, and what I know is all I know about the George Papadopoulos matter, Wolf, and yeah, I came on here at your request to do this quickly. The only thing I know about George Papadopoulos, frankly, is what's in the actual indictment. I don't know George Papadopoulos. I've not spoken with his lawyers, so I don't know the nature and scope of his full engagement with his lawyers, what they were dealing with. I know what he's pled guilty to, so I really got to stick to the document there because I don't know the information on the other.
The indictments, at least the indictments suggest lots of illegal activity on the part of Paul Manafort and Rick Gates, and a guilty plea now as far as George Papadopoulos is concerned. So here's the bottom line for you. If he's fully cooperating, Papadopoulos now, with the FBI, with the special counsel, Robert Mueller, how worried should other Trump campaign officials be that they potentially could be implicated? Maybe just for perjury, but maybe for other illegal activity.
Well, the way to avoid perjury is when you're dealing with a federal agent in an investigation is to tell the truth. So, I mean, as I said before, it's often, unfortunately, it's not the underlying activity. It's the misstatement to the federal agent. So I would tell anybody, as any lawyer would, when you're going in and dealing with this, you know, tell the truth. And if you don't know something, you don't know it. But if you're going to testify before a federal agent, make sure what you're saying is truthful.
But clearly, in this particular case, George Papadopoulos, he didn't testify. He didn't tell the truth, and some will argue he didn't do it because he was trying to protect the Trump campaign, and presumably there are others involved who maybe were doing similar activity, who were trying to protect the Trump campaign as well, and as a result, they weren't fully honest with federal investigators. You must be concerned about that.
I would tell anybody that's going to go speak to a federal investigator, as any lawyer would, to tell the truth, or to exercise your privilege if you feel like you can't testify against your own interests. You have a Fifth Amendment privilege. People have those, but I would tell people, tell the truth. And where this particular indictment with George Papadopoulos came into being, obviously, was the FBI has, and now they've got a guilty plea, so it's not just an allegation anymore, is that he did not tell the truth when he was being interviewed by the agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And that's a violation of 18 U.S.C. 1001, and that's what happened there.
So are you concerned that he's fully cooperating now, and over the course of these past few months, he may have implicated others?
No, I'm not concerned. Because I'm completely convinced, as I was since the outset, that not only is there no Russian collusion, there's no obstruction. I'm not concerned about it. We're doing our job and have a good relationship with the special counsel's office as far as information goes. I'm not concerned about this at all, and no one else is either.
Is there any chance, Jay, is there any chance at all that the president will try to fire Robert Mueller?
No, I saw a couple people talking about this morning, and the answer to that is no. The president is not interfering with the special counsel Mueller's position. He's not firing the special counsel. He said that before. The fact that I don't think that anybody is surprised that an indictment came down today, or that there was this plea, because we expected this indictment. I mean, I think I've been on your broadcast talking about this a couple months back. I mean, we've expected this for months after they had the raid on Paul Manafort's house. You thought there was going to be something. But what the something is, though, is activities going back, it looks like as much as a decade ago. So this was obviously, and some are telling me, and I don't have verification of any of this, Wolf, on what I'm going to say right now. Just, there are statements out there, I'm hearing from other people, that there may have been an Eastern District of Virginia investigation going on even before Mueller was appointed, and this may have been merged with it. We've heard that from some people. I think you all have talked about that too. So it may have been that they put it all together when the special counsel was appointed. But no, I'm not concerned about where this goes. Obviously, I think one thing this does establish is special counsel's moving expeditiously, and that's, I think, good for the country and good for the president.
Is there any chance the president will start pardoning any of those implicated right now, like Paul Manafort or Rick Gates?
I've had no conversation with the president on pardoning anybody involved with this at all.
Would that be smart if he were to do so?
No, I mean, look, the pardon power, it constitutionally vests with the President of the United States. But I'm not going to speculate on whether it would be smart or not. I haven't had any conversation with the President, no indication at all that that's where this would go.
But are you concerned if he were to pardon some of these individuals who may be implicated, may be charged, it could be seen as obstruction of justice by the special counsel?
Well, look, here's the fact of the matter is there's been no conversations with the president about these indictments came down this morning. I've had no conversations, nor would I discuss it with you if I did, but I haven't had a conversation with the president about pardons or pardoning individuals, so I really do not want to speculate on what a pardon that doesn't exist may or may not do. Because it's not something that's on the table. I mean, it was
well,
not
I asked the
discussed.
question because of Sheriff Arpaio out in Arizona.
But Sheriff Arpaio had nothing to. Well, the president has the. I mean, look, the president has the authority to pardon, and he did pardon Sheriff Arpaio. He had the authority constitutionally to do that. Had nothing to do with this matter at all, as you know. So, of course, presidents have the authority to pardon. Presidents pardon. But there's no indication here. I've not had any conversations. There's been no conversations that I'm aware of with anyone, including the president, regarding pardons here. This has happened this morning. No conversations on that.
Do you know if the special counsel has asked for the president's finances, his tax returns, other information along those lines?
I have no basis to believe that is the case.
Do you still believe the president is not being investigated?
There is not what's what we said is we've been clear. There's not a formal investigation of the president of the United States. We have been cooperating if there's questions that come from the special counsel's office. We've been in full cooperation mode. The inside counsel, White House special counsel on this, Ty Cobb, has been very, very clear on the transparent nature of the document production that's gone on here, and that continues to be handled in a very professional manner.
There was one thing that jumped out, a lot of things that jumped out at me at the affidavit involving the guilty plea from George Papadopoulos, that there was a court order. They went through his email, his Facebook. He tried to delete his Facebook page, which had potentially incriminating information. I assume similar activity is going on with other individuals. What's your reaction to that?
I would say, look, I'm not going to speculate or give free legal advice to others what they should do or should not do. They should be in consultation with their lawyers. I'm not going to speculate that. I'm not going to render legal advice, and I appreciate it you asking me, but I'm not going to give people legal advice. I tell them don't do anything that would violate the law. If I was their lawyer, that's what I tell them. Do nothing that would violate the law.
You're the president's lawyer. Has he been asked to testify or answer questions from the special counsel?
He has not.
If he is asked, will he cooperate?
The president said he would.
And you think that would be a good idea for him to do so?
Well, whether it be a good
as his attorney,
say a good idea. Well, I mean, I would look in the normal course of concluding this. If in fact the president was asked a series of questions by the special counsel, we have no indication of that. The president said he will be. He said this months and months ago that he would cooperate. So I'm not concerned about that.
Because I know the president said that, I'm asking you as his attorney, would you advise him to do so?
I am not going to share with you, Wolf, advice I would give or not give my client on a matter that I haven't discussed with the client. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right, Jay Sekulow, it was kind of you to join us on this very important day, I dare say, historic day in this entire investigation. Jay Sekulow is the president's attorney. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Wolf. Appreciate it.
All right, let's get some reaction to what we just heard. Jeffrey Toobin is with us, our senior legal analyst. All right, Jeffrey, what do you think?
Well, I think the lines of defense on the two cases are quite clear from what Jay Sekulow. The first is Papadopoulos is a nobody and was not an important person in the campaign. So anything he may have done with the Russians is irrelevant. Now, that will be tested by looking at the emails and who really was on the other end of those emails and what, if any, action was taken. But I think the defense line about Papadopoulos is clear. And on the Manafort and Gates matter, the line of defense is none of this has anything to do with the Trump campaign. And at one level, that is true because it is related to his financing of his business. But that business was, for the most part, as outlined in the indictment, getting millions of dollars from Ukrainian interests that are very closely tied to the Vladimir Putin regime. Plus, the conspiracy alleged in the Manafort indictment is said to include the time when he was the campaign chairman for Donald Trump. So, you know, I think these are intelligent, appropriate defenses on the part of that Jay Sekulow is putting out there, but they are also subject to real scrutiny as well.
And very quickly, he did say the president is not going to fire the special counsel Robert Mueller, and he's not thinking about pardons at this point in connection. That's important.
That is important, but I would suggest that we check back regularly on both those questions because they are extremely important, and Donald Trump has been known to change his mind. And I think the issue of pardons and firing Director Mueller, those are good questions to keep asking.
We will. Stand by. Everyone stand by. We're waiting for the White House press briefing to begin. We'll get the official White House reaction to all these dramatic developments. Sarah Sanders getting ready to answer questions. Let's see if she shows up with any other White House officials, maybe some legal advisors, too, because there are going to be a ton of questions on all of this. Also, we're expecting to see Paul Manafort and Rick Gates make their first court appearance momentarily. Special coverage continues right after this.
Ooh, look at the front of that building. I mean, to have a president that you got to spend all this fucking time with. And that's what gets me as a citizen. All of this shit regarding a president that you...
Yeah. You're right, though. You're right, Mom.
Right,
oh, here we go. Here we go, folks. Here we go.
I'd like to start the briefing today by addressing a topic that I know all of you are preparing to ask me about, and that's tax reform. A couple of you got it. The initial House tax reform bill will be introduced on Wednesday by the Ways and Means Committee. This is the product of months of work and is now going through an open process in the House. The committee plans to mark up the bill next week, starting on Monday. The House is likely to consider the bill week of November 13th. In order to stay on pace, we want to see a House bill passed by Thanksgiving. This is a very aggressive timeline, but one that will help us get tax cuts this year so families and businesses can plan for 2018. We look forward to the details of the tax bill being released on Wednesday. But today I want to take a step back and explain what we're working to do using an anecdote we can all understand. This story has been floating around the internet for a while, and it's important to keep in mind that the numbers are not exact, and I'm also not encouraging any drinking. So file that away. It's mostly for my parents. But I think you'll enjoy it. Suppose that every day 10 people, for our purposes, we'll say reporters, go out for beer, and the bill for all 10 comes to $100. If these 10 reporters paid their tab every night the way we pay our taxes, it would go something like this. The first 4, the poorest, would pay nothing. The 5th would pay $1. The 6th would pay $3. The 7th would pay $7. The 8th would pay $12. The 9th would pay $18. The 10th, the richest, would pay $59. So that's what they decided to do. The 10 reporters drank in the bar every day and seemed quite happy with the arrangement until one day the bar owner threw them a curveball. Since you're all such good customers, he said, I'm going to reduce the cost of your daily beer by $20. Drinks for the 10 reporters would now cost just $80. The group still wanted to pay their bill the way we pay our taxes, so the first 4 were unaffected. They would still drink for free. But what about the other 6? How could they divide the $20 windfall so that everyone would get their fair share? These are the reporters after all, so they're concerned with fairness. They realize that $20 divided by 6 is $3.33. But if they subtracted that from everybody's share, then the 5th reporter and the 6th reporter, which would each end up being paid to drink beer. So the bar owner suggested that it would be fair to reduce each man's bill by a higher percentage the poorer he was. By doing that, he explained, they'd continue following the principle of the tax system they've been using. So he proceeded to work out the amounts he suggested that each should pay now. And so the 5th reporter, like the first 4, now paid nothing. He got a 100% saving. The 6th now paid $2 instead of $3, a 33% saving. The 7th now paid $5 instead of $7, a 28% saving. The 8th now paid $9 instead of $12, a 25% saving. The 9th now paid $14 instead of $18, which was a 22% saving. And the 10th now paid $49 instead of $59, a 16% saving. So each of the 6 was better off than before, and the first 4 continued to drink for free. But once outside the bar, the reporters began to compare their savings. I only got $1 out of the $20 saving, declared the 6th reporter, and she pointed to the 10th reporter. He got 10. Yes, that's right, exclaimed the 5th reporter. I only saved $1 too. It's unfair that he received 10 times more benefit than me. That's true, shouted the 7th reporter. Why should he get $10 back when I only got 2? The wealthy gets all the breaks. Wait a minute, yelled the first 4 reporters in unison. We didn't get anything at all. This new tax system exploits the poor. The 9 reporters yelled at the 10th and made him feel bad. So the next night, the 10th man didn't show up for drinks, and the 9 sat down and had their beers without him. But when it came time to pay the bill, they discovered something important. They no longer had enough money between them all to even cover half of the bill. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how our tax system works. The people who already paid the highest taxes will naturally benefit from a tax reduction, but not the largest percent benefit. Taxing them too much, attack them, and they might start drinking overseas where the atmosphere is somewhat friendlier. This is a silly story, of course, but it illustrates some very important points. Our tax cuts and reforms will create a fairer system that works better for everyone. And it will make our country the friendliest in the world for American families trying to build a better life for themselves and their children, and for American companies seeking a competitive edge. And I'll be happy to get that story to everybody so that you can get those numbers later. Again, I know that that may be an oversimplification, but I think it paints a very good picture of the tax system. And with that, I'll take your questions.
Sarah, first I'd like to get the White House reaction to the indictments of Paul Manafort and Rick Gates and the plea agreement with George Papadopoulos. And specifically, I know we have heard a couple of tweets from the president. If you can help me understand, when he says, why aren't crooked Hillary and the Dems the focus, is the president saying that Special Counsel Mueller should really be investigating Hillary Clinton and the Democrats? And is he going to rule out once and for all firing Robert Mueller?
Look, I'll address the second question first. President said last week, I believe it was last week, and I've said several times before, there's no intention or plan to make any changes in regards to special counsel. But look, today's announcement has nothing to do with the president, has nothing to do with the president's campaign or campaign activity. The real collusion scandal, as we've said several times before, has everything to do with the Clinton campaign, Fusion GPS, and Russia. There's clear evidence of the Clinton campaign colluding with Russian intelligence to spread disinformation and smear the president to influence the election. We've been saying from day one there's been no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, and nothing in the indictment today changes that at all.
But the George Papadopoulos indictment is about the campaign. It is specifically about the campaign.
It has nothing to do with the activities of the campaign. It has to do with his failure to tell the truth. That doesn't have anything to do with the campaign or the campaign's activities.
But it is the clearest evidence yet of ties between the Trump campaign and Russian officials. So
again, there are no activities or official capacity in which the Trump campaign was engaged in any of these activities. Most of them took place well before the campaign ever even existed. John?
Sarah, can you just explain what George Papadopoulos' role with the campaign was?
It was extremely limited. It was a volunteer position. And again, no activity was ever done in an official capacity on behalf of the campaign in that regard.
What about the outreach that he was making to campaign officials to try to put together this
meeting? You mean the outreach that was repeatedly denied and pushed away and said, we're not going to take any action on that?
Can you explain? what happened with his outreach?
He reached out and nothing happened beyond that, which I think shows, one, his level of importance in the campaign, and two, shows what little role he had within coordinating anything officially for the campaign. John Dever.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. I wanted to ask about Mr. Mueller's investigation. The president at times has called it a hoax, and he's called it a witch hunt. You've used similar type of language before as it relates to his investigation. Last week you indicated, Sarah, that you believe that Mr. Mueller is wrapping up his investigation. And I've heard similar things coming from other senior administration officials. Do you still believe that Mr. Mueller is in the process of wrapping up his investigation?
We still expect this to conclude soon. Yes. Francesca?
Thank you, Sarah. Paul Manafort was high-ranking in the president's campaign at one time. I'd like to know what the president's relationship is with him now. Do they still talk? When was the last time they might have had contact?
As far as we can tell, we know that they haven't spoken in several months. The last known conversation was back all the way to February. And as far as anything beyond that, with Paul, I'm not sure of any other contact. I know that there was some initial contact after the president was sworn in with him at meetings here at the White House, but nothing directly with the president. Deborah?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. On March 31, according to the affidavit by Mr. Papadopoulos, he attended a foreign policy meeting. The president was there. He said that he talked about how that Russia wanted to talk to the president. What did the president think when he said he wanted to arrange a meeting between Trump and Putin? And how did other people in the campaign react to that?
I'm not sure that the president recalls specific details of the meeting. Again, it was a brief meeting that took place quite some time ago. It was the one time that group ever met. And beyond that, I really don't have anything to add. John Kizzy?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. As you mentioned, Mr. Manafort, Mr. Gates were named in this for things not having anything to do with the campaign, but with alleged money laundering regarding other business. Now, under those circumstances, would the president consider or rule out pardoning either of them?
I haven't had any conversations with him about that. I think we should let the process play through before we start looking at those steps.
Papadopoulos at this time was referring to Jeff Sessions at the time, who was overseeing Trump's Foreign Policy Advisory Committee. What does this mean for Jeff Sessions?
Somebody on a volunteer committee, I'm not sure how that would impact the Attorney General directly.
Can you say, given what we have learned over the last few hours, can you say when the president was first aware that Russia was behind the hacking and was in the possession of emails, what they considered to be damaging emails about the Clinton campaign that they were trying to get to the Trump campaign? When was he first aware of that?
I'm not sure of the specific date of when that took place, so I'd have to look into back to Jeff.
Sarah, does the president regret having hired Paul Manafort to be his campaign manager? And is he and the rest of the White House concerned that this issue will distract from tax reform and the other domestic policy and foreign policy?
We're not worried about it distracting because it doesn't have anything to do with us, because this is something that is action that took place outside of the campaign or campaign activity.
And as far as whether he regrets having hired him to be campaign manager?
I didn't ask him that question specifically.
Sir, how can you describe Mr. Papadopoulos as having a limited role when there's a photograph of Mr. Papadopoulos sitting at a table with
the president has thousands of photographs with millions of people, so.
He was also cited by then candidate Trump in a meeting with the Washington Post as to who his top foreign policy advisors are. That seems to fight against what you're saying. And also, how is it not collusion when George Papadopoulos was in contact with various people who were promising dirt on Hillary Clinton? A series of events that closely mirrors what occurred with the president's own son.
This individual was on in
pursuit of information that was damaging about the Clintons. How is all of that not collusion?
Look, this individual was the member of a volunteer advisory council that met one time over the course of a year, and he was part of a list that was read out in the Washington Post. I'd hardly call that some sort of regular advisor, or as you want to, push that he's like a senior member of the staff. He was not paid by the campaign. He was a volunteer on again, a council that met once.
Collusion activities, Sarah. He was pursuing information from the Russians.
Again, he was a volunteer. I think that's something you need to ask him. I'm not here to speak on behalf of the thousands of people that may have volunteered on the campaign.
Believe it or not, I have a question on this, but also on technical work. The president has called on Congress to investigate Hillary Clinton. Is he confident that they will do that?
I think that's a question you have to ask Congress, but I think that there are enough reports and enough information out there that seems to suggest it might not be a bad idea.
Leaders of committees.
I don't know if he's had a member of Congress specifically tell him that they're planning.
My question about tax reform is where does the president stand on the idea of phasing in the corporate tax cut so it would reach 20% sometime around 2022?
I think the president's been clear that his priority is to make sure that that's where we start with the tax plan currently. I think, again, he's laid out what his principles are. As of right now, that hasn't changed, and don't anticipate that it will. Major?
Sir, just so we have the terminology straight, when you say George Papadopoulos had no official capacity, what do you mean by that?
I mean, he was a volunteer on the campaign and a volunteer member of an advisory council that met one time.
So these activities were entirely of his invention. No one asked him to do any of these things. Is that what you're telling the American public?
I'm telling you that he was a volunteer member of an advisory council that literally met one time.
What I ask is, now there are 2 episodes in which people associated with the campaign at a rather high level, at least in one instance, George Papadopoulos was a member of a foreign policy or military advisory committee, sought word on Hillary Clinton from people representing themselves as either linked to or associated with the Russian government. Is that just a coincidence?
The only interaction I'm aware of that deals with this individual was him reaching out and being repeatedly denied. So that's all I can tell you is he asked to do things, he was basically pushed back or not responded to in any way. So any actions that he took would have been on his own, and you'd have to ask him about those because I can't answer.
Later activities of the campaign to have that same kind of meeting at Trump Tower.
I'm sorry?
What explains the campaign's later involvement with those associated with the Russian government, or said they were, to get dirt on Hillary Clinton later in the campaign?
We've addressed that. They took one meeting, nothing came of it. No, I don't believe so.
That does not indicate a pattern of trying to obtain that information from that
government. A pattern of getting information about your opponent? No, the big difference here is you have a meeting that took place versus millions of dollars being sent to create fake information to actually influence the election. You compare those two, those are apples and oranges. What the Clinton campaign did, what the DNC did, was actually exchange money. They took a meeting. Those are far different, and one is pretty common practice in any campaign to take a meeting. The other one is actually paying money for false information. That's a big deal and a big difference.
Thanks, Sarah. I have 2 questions for you, but first if I could follow up on your comment there about the GPS dossier. This is an issue that many senior level administration officials have pointed to during these questions about the special counsel. Has the White House asked the Department of Justice to look into this issue?
Not that I'm aware of.
Can I follow up on Mueller? You've spoken with the president today?
Yes, I have.
Can you give us a little bit about his reaction to the news this morning? Obviously news that swept the nation's capital. But how did the president respond to this news about 2 people who did work for his campaign? Was he disappointed that Paul Manafort received this news today, that he was being charged on these 12 counts?
He responded the same way the rest of us in the White House have, and that's without a lot of reaction because it doesn't have anything to do with us.
We are now talking about 2 of the most senior members of the campaign at a very pivotal time, through and including the RNC last year, who are now under federal indictment
for something
very
they did
serious crimes
outside
that
of the campaign.
They did not allegedly conduct during their work for the campaign. But doesn't it speak to the president's judgment that he would choose to have these 2 individuals in very high positions, having allegedly committed these crimes in the years leading up to their roles?
These were seasoned operatives, not, you make it sound like they were, regular offenders that have been in massive amounts of trouble. These were seasoned operatives that have worked on a number of campaigns. Paul Manafort was brought in to lead the delegate process, which he did, and was dismissed not too long after that.
The president has no regrets.
Again, I didn't ask him that question specifically. April.
Leads you to believe that the Mueller investigation will conclude soon. Do you also believe that there could be more indictments? And my third question on another subject, welfare reform. The president talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and we try and find out what is the focus, how you plan to implement welfare reform.
We haven't made any specific announcements when it comes to welfare reform. Those are ongoing conversations and we're looking at ways to improve the system, but nothing specific to roll out at this time. Sorry, what was the first part of your question?
The first one, what leads you to believe that this will conclude soon, the Mueller investigation? Have you been given heads up? What?
Those are the indications that we have at this time. I can't go any further than that.
Indications from who and where? Indications from where?
As I just said, I can't go any further.
And also, what about, you don't believe there'll be any more indictments at all?
That's a question you'd have to ask Robert Mueller.
You're saying that it's going to be concluded soon?
I still attend that we believe that it will be concluded soon, but beyond that, I don't have anything else to add on a specific time frame.
Sarah, in March, the president called March 2016, the president called George Papadopoulos an excellent guy. Does he still believe that Papadopoulos is an excellent guy?
Look, he was referring to the council. He was going through the list of names with the Washington Post, and nothing more than that, and complimentary of the people that were volunteering on behalf of the campaign.
That a campaign supervisor told him, I would encourage you to make the trip to Russia if feasible. How does that not constitute the campaign encouraging him to make contact with him?
I'm not aware of that conversation, so I can't speak to that.
At the end of the day, is there any concern at all from this administration, again, trying to drill down on what was asked earlier, that two people who worked for the president are now under indictment? One has pleaded guilty, and he promised to hire only the best people. Is this an example of the best people to hire?
Look, again, this goes back to these were activities that took place outside of the scope of the campaign. I can't comment on anything they did.
But are these the best people to hire?
Look, the president hired Paul Manafort to handle the delegate process, which he did, and he was dismissed not too long after that.
Sarah, last week the administration opposed a federal judge's decision that allowed an undocumented teen immigrant to have an abortion. Now that that case is over, it's been decided she's had that abortion. What is the White House reaction to that decision? It doesn't set a dangerous precedent going forward.
I can't comment on the specifics of that at this point.
Case at all? Did he comment on it?
I didn't speak directly with him about the case. Fine.
Sarah, thank you. I'd like to ask you about a different topic. Just breaking before the briefing, court banned the president from changing military policy on service by transgender people. What's the reaction from the White House and the plan moving forward in reference to this?
Obviously, this is something just announced. The Department of Justice has it. They're reviewing it, and I'd refer you them to any specific questions.
Congressman Dowdy this weekend had suggested that there should be an investigation into the leaks of the grand jury investigation or Robert Mueller's investigation. Do you think there should be an investigation? Are you all asking for an investigation?
We haven't asked for that investigation to take place.
An investigation?
I think that anytime there is leaking of sensitive information, it should be looked into, but beyond that, we don't have any comment. Kristen?
Does the president in any way hold Jared Kushner responsible for hiring Paul Manafort? After all, he was an early supporter of bringing him on board.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And Sarah, to just follow up on the point of hiring the best people, the top people, he said, does this not at the very least raise questions about President Trump's vetting process and judgment when it comes to bringing on these people?
I don't believe so. I think I've answered that quite a few times today.
Two quick questions. To the president, you said back in July that the president believed that the investigation for the special counsels would stay within the confines of Russian election meddling. Given what we've learned today, does the president believe Bob Mueller overstepped the boundaries of this investigation?
I haven't spoken with him specifically about that detail.
Okay, my second question, Sarah, would just be on the topic of regarding the plea agreement with George Papadopoulos. You indicated the president did not remember that March 31st meeting with photograph, right?
No, I didn't say he didn't remember the meeting. I said he didn't remember those comments from.
Did he remember anything about that meeting, his interactions with Papadopoulos, given that he's talked about his great memory?
I don't believe that he went into detail about the meeting itself. He remembers it taking place, but we didn't go into anything beyond that or any specifics.
And specifically did not remember the Russia comment? Do you remember Papadopoulos' presence? Did they have interaction?
Not that I'm aware of.
I'll just get off with a poll giving 33% approval, 62% disapproval to the president. What's your reaction? Is the president aware of this? Any plans of changing anything?
Look, we're focused aggressively on pushing forward on a very bold agenda specific to tax reform, tax cuts. I think that the economy continuing to grow and strengthen is something that will certainly change those numbers. But at the same time, I think these are some of the same polls that also said this president would never be president, so I don't have a lot of confidence in them. Take one last one.
Sir, can you just please clarify your answer to Mara? The stock market is moving downwards on this news that possibly the corporate rate could be phased in over several years. I wasn't sure if you were trying to make the point that the president would be for a phase-in or against a phase-in?
No, I said that the president laid out his principles, and it doesn't include the phasing in, so we're still committed to that moving forward, but, and I don't have any reason to believe we have changes on that front at this point.
So the red line of the 20% corporate
I'm not drawing a red line, I'm just saying those are the principles that we've laid out, and we haven't adjusted or changed our principles since this process started. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good day.
Wow.
So there she is, the White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, insisting that George Papadopoulos was irrelevant, not a very significant
That's
player
it, folks, for the
campaign.
press conference, or what I'm going to call the Great Dance, because she did her job in protecting her boss, the president, and she very artfully dodged a number of questions
from the White House that George
where she
was a non-event, a
didn't
who was
have an answer
had no influence in
that
the campaign,
protected the president. She said, I don't know the answer to that question.
We've heard
So,
previously from
what do I think about this? Well,
etc., that his entreaties were rejected.
she did her job, but the real question is what is going to come down next. I'll be back later on Zenny 62, and if you want to read the indictments, the previous live stream has copies of both the indictments in the description. There are links to them right there. You can take a look for yourself.
In these documents
and
is the email
stay tuned, and I'll be back in about
from an official who says
later this afternoon, probably about 3 hours, 2 hours, on this matter. But stay tuned, and I'm going to go real quick and see if any questions you have. Sorry, because I'm just shifting over here. But, and let me shift over here. Link back to your question here. Oh, I see. Okay. Joseph Binsman. Hey, Joseph, how are you? Joseph Binsman says,
with an unnamed professor,
never a lot of new info from that woman, but man, the smoke is definitely heading the fire one of these days. I think the smoke is dark black. Dark black. What do you think, Mom?
Well, I didn't hear the question.
So you can't really
I just think this is terrible. The whole thing is to be around a sitting president is just really a bum.
Yep.
Big bum that just exploded and is just starting to sither.
The Russians are just pushing this on the campaign.
So to have this kind of stuff come up
that's sort of the heart of what has to be resolved.
Around a sitting president and all the money that's being spent and all the conversation and all the important things that's going on in our country that needs to be addressed and said to by high officials, the president. They're spending this time on a guy that should have never been elected. It's obvious that Russia elected the president. We got a president that most of us that's got common sense don't want.
It belies all logic to me legally. You have a lot of allegations right now that are supported by this affidavit that somebody's already pled guilty to. It's not a hypothetical this person was
I'm
involved.
waiting for the
really
Donald Trump Jr. part
of credibility to the allegation that there was a campaign person who was knowledgeable about what the campaign wanted.
As 831 Scott asked, do I think Donald Trump is nervous? I think he should be.
I think that the defense is one you would expect, Gloria pointed out.
And Joseph Binsman says, Sanders is always deflecting and so full of it. But you know what? She's got a tough job. And yeah, she shows a job, but she does her job well. I have to say, she does her job very well under the circumstances. I give her an A+.
She should have been
an A+. Yeah, my mom says she should have been a defense attorney because she's doing a whale of a job under.
And I really not good for the American public.
But she's doing a whale of a job under unusual circumstances, to say the least. And so she could either
was not there.
Yeah.
It's
So
not clear exactly why he was represented
there you go.
by a public defender.
Oh, Manafort and Gates pled not guilty to the charges.
The judge
Hold on.
that Rick Gates
Look at this.
plans to hire his own private attorney, but that attorney was not here today. So in his stead, there was a public defender there who entered a plea of not guilty for Rick Gates. Again, both Paul Manafort and Rick Gates entered not guilty pleas. The judge has now set forth a schedule for future hearings before the judge that's actually going to be hearing this case. We expect in a little while we're going to hear from, at least from Paul Manafort's attorney, who's going to come out here and speak to the cameras right after this court hearing. The two men did not speak. Manafort and Gates did not speak during the court hearing. They just entered. They came in and said their name when the judge asked them, and apart from that, they did not say anything. But both, at this point, they've entered not guilty pleas here before the magistrate judge in federal court.
Very significant developments indeed, Evan. We're going to stay in very close touch with you. That's it for me. Thanks for watching. Brooke Baldwin picks up our special coverage right now. Brooke?
All right, Wolf, I'm going to take it from here. Thank you, sir. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Thanks for being with me. You're watching CNN special coverage of a landmark day in this Russia investigation. Moments ago, you saw there.
Wow.
The spokeswoman at the White House,
get your comments here.
Responding to this news
says Joseph Jones says, "Isn't it funny how Trump instantly went on the defensive and immediately tried to turn it back on Democrats and Hillary Clinton?" Yep. I want to see if he's tweeted anything new here. Hold on a second.
The campaign's former foreign policy advisor. He admitted he lied to the FBI about his communications with Russians.
Nope, Donald Trump has not tweeted anything new in 4 hours. The last tweet was also, "There is no collusion," which the George Papadopoulos
and his business
statements refute. There was something going on there.
Not guilty in court right around the same time that White House held.
We'll be back, folks. I'm going to do some searching and sleuthing. We'll see you all. Thank you for watching Zenny62 on YouTube. Remember that. Joseph Jones reminds us Mueller is a registered Republican who was hired by one of his cabinet to investigate this. There you go. Well, again, and I remind people, this isn't a matter of being against the president, but for the office of the president of the United States and making sure that it's operated correctly. That's the idea. All right? All right, folks. I'll see you all.